Hello! If you are watching this video, I want to congratulate you because that just means you really are into learning and you want to further your understanding about biomolecules. Yes, you heard me right. This video is about biomolecules. Before anything else, I would like to show this scenario with you. So we have here a child. Kung nakikita nyo, medyo malaki yung ulo niya and then medyo parang there's something wrong with his eyes. Because definitely there's something wrong with this kid. Okay? 2 years old na siya, pero hindi niya pa rin kaya gumapang, hindi niya pa rin kayang tumaob gamit ang sarili niyang muscles. And definitely, nahihirapan na siyang makakita, kaya ganyan yung mata niya. At at the same time, nahihirapan na rin siyang makahinga. Okay? And later on, sadly, magkakaroon ng complication sa lungs niya and magkakaroon siya ng pneumonia and that would cause actually his death. Okay? Anong meron ang batang ito? Anong kondisyon meron siya? Una, nahihirapan siyang makapag-produce or yung system niya hindi nagpo-produce ng certain enzyme. Okay? And that enzyme is the hexosaminidase A. Ano bang ginagawa ng enzyme na to? Ang ginagawa ng enzyme na to is dinadigest niya ang gangliosides. Gangliosides are fat, okay, that are produced by our body. Now, too much of gangliosides can actually be detrimental in your nervous system. Ganyan yung nangyayari sa batang ito. And ang sakit niya ay Tay-Sachs disease. Okay? So, as you can see here, this is a protein, an enzyme. So, ngayon pa lang sinasabi ko na that all enzymes are proteins and then gangliosides are lipids. So, these are two major types or two major groups of biomolecules and you can see certain problems with each. Tingnan nyo nangyayari. It can be detrimental. It can be the cause of the death of someone already. Okay? That's why it is very important that we understand the structure, the function, and even the connections between these groups of biomolecules. Okay? I named this slide or this topic as the chemistry of life because definitely chemistry and biology are not two different sides of the coin. They're actually on the same plane and they work side by side. The walkthrough for our discussion. First, we're going to discuss the difference between organic and inorganic molecules. Another, we're going to differentiate the difference between vitamins and minerals. Is there really a difference? And then we're going to differentiate acids and bases, which of course I know you're very familiar with this already. We just need, or I just feel the need to discuss this because definitely throughout our discussion in biology, we're going to deal with these terminologies. And then lastly, we're going to discuss the four major types of biomolecules. So, right on the spot, can we identify which among these molecules, okay, is an organic molecule? Now, if you're watching this, you can just say, the right one. You can say that it's this one because right away, you can say that there's carbon. And I think it's a bit popular that when something is considered an organic molecule, it has the carbon atom, okay? But remember, that is not always the case because there are some exemptions to that rule. The exemption, for example, is carbon monoxide, carbon dioxide, calcium carbonate. Okay? Yeah, they have carbon atoms, but they are not organic molecules. Okay? So what is the definition really of an organic molecule? Well, you can find a lot in different resources, but to make this simplified, since this is not a chemistry class, I just want to share with you that it's about the connection or the bonding between carbon and hydrogen atom. If the bond between carbon and hydrogen is actually existing and it can be the backbone of that molecule, you can say that that is an organic molecule. Okay? Now, you have heard maybe some people or even your mother, for example, wants to buy a lot of organic food. Okay, what does it mean to be organic food? Sabi nila, ito daw yung mga hindi gumagamit ng fertilizer, ito yung lahat ng paraan is organic, or sinasabi nila it's natural. Okay, but ang tanong is, can we apply the definition of organic in the food in this context to the organic of biomolecules? Definitely hindi. Bakit? If you're going to analyze each vegetable that you can see in the picture, okay, the vegetables are more than 50% composed of water. Let's say this pipino, okay? Now, water is an inorganic molecule, and therefore, this is not completely organic. Yeah, it's composed of fiber, which is, of course, cellulose, okay? But nevertheless, I can say that this is not completely organic. So this is combination of organic and inorganic. So what I'm trying to say here is that when we try to define something in science, okay, we should put certain division, okay, na ito yung ginagamit sa consumer's world. Ito naman yung ginagamit sa science, okay? Kasi admit it or not, we just borrow the language from from English. Ginagamit natin sila sa science. Makikita niyo yan sa physics, di ba? So like for example, power, work, o saan ba galing itong mga concept na to? Hindi naman yan nanggaling talaga sa science. These terms are just borrowed from the natural conversation, from the English language. Okay? So now, when you see something like food, this is organic, and this one is inorganic because nga processed siya and something, well, at the back of your mind, you know that there is a big difference, okay? There is a division ng definition. Hindi same ang definition ng organic sa food at organic sa molecule. Now, if you're going to search the internet, magugulat na lang kayo na, wait lang, bakit parang hindi ata tama yung sinabi ni Sir sa nakikita kong diagram na to? Well, that can be correct. I mean, that can be the case. Like for example, this one, I found this sa internet and I find it parang there's something wrong in it. Ano kaya yun? Under organic, we have glucose, yeah. There's carbon and hydrogen, as you can see. Carbon, hydrogen, carbon, hydrogen, carbon, hydrogen, check. Okay, so these are all organic compounds. How about inorganic compounds? We have here the sand, yeah. NaCl, ammonia, yes. How about isopropyl alcohol? Okay. Can you see the interaction between carbon and hydrogen there? Definitely, this is organic, but this is categorized under inorganic compounds. So, that's wrong. Okay? Another diagram that I found in the internet, let's look at this. Under inorganic compounds, you have salt, NaCl, tama naman. May or may not contain carbon. That's definitely true. So sometimes contain sodium, oxygen, or calcium, but without carbon. But without carbon, remember, as I've mentioned kanina, my examples are carbon monoxide, carbon dioxide, diba? So these things have carbon, but they are not organic molecules. So again, do not believe anything that you see in the internet. Okay, so I can say that your books, okay, are more reliable sources of information. All these biomolecules will not be possible, okay, without, of course, the carbon molecule. I mean, not carbon molecule, sorry, carbon atom. Okay, so it has its 4 valence electrons that are readily available to interact with all other atoms. Kaya mas nagiging flexible, mas nagkakaroon, maganda siyang building block for molecules. Okay, kaya nagkakaroon ng different variations because carbon is, how shall I say it? If I'm going to make an analogy, parang napaka-friendly niya. Okay, parang to anyone, madali siya makapag-octet rule kasi nga, 4 na to, Tapos, atom dito, atom dito, atom dito, atom dito. O, di perfect na siya. Stable na siyang molecule. Okay? Now, let's go to the difference between vitamins and minerals. Straight away, vitamins are organic, minerals are inorganic. You have learned in your earth science that minerals are definitely inorganic, so that's not a question anymore. But what we want to differentiate now is that there are vitamins that are water soluble and there are fat soluble. Okay? The water-soluble vitamins are these ones, the B's and then the C's. Okay, usually, kapag regular semester, I usually ask this in the quiz and then discuss this further, the differences. But we have to focus on what's most essential. Okay, and the fat solubles are madaling tandaan, ADEK. So we have A, D, E, and K. As grade 12 students who are enthusiasts of science, so dapat familiar kayo sa mga ano bang purpose nitong mga to. Okay? Ano ba yung nagagawa nilang benefit sa katawan natin? But, okay, another thing that I want to share is kapag magluluto kayo ng food, for example, tapos may vitamin A siya, may D, tapos E at K, mas makukuha nyo yung nutrient dun sa food na kinakain nyo. If meron siyang somehow solute or somehow helper para makuha nyo itong mga vitamins na to. Like for example, kapag igigisa mo yung gulay, so may mantika kang gagamitin, so that oil is going to help you to actually get the vitamins from the food, okay, from the produce. Okay, so these are now some minerals. So marami yan. Now let's talk about acids versus bases. We all know this already, I assume, okay? Though it's not right to assume that you know everything or you know anything already, okay? But I would do that because you are already in grade 12. Now, so if the pH level is low, you know that it's acidic. But if the pH level is high, it's going to be basic. Okay, if we're going to evaluate this seems very accurate, but look at this. Okay, so bakit meron dyang lemon? Why is lemon having the pH 10 despite na maasim siya? Diba usually pag maasim yung fruit, it's acidic, right? Pero bakit yung lemon nandun siya sa alkaline side? Okay, and naririnig nyo na siguro yung ginagawa ng iba sa inyo or na iba sa atin na we put lemon in water. Okay, and then we claim that the water is now alkaline. Well, that is correct. Okay? Bakit maasim pero alkaline or basic? Kasi if you're going to remove the citric acid, okay, from the lemon, and yung lemon lang itself without the citric acid, kung titikman nyo siya, it's bitter, mapait. And that's an indication of it being basic. So kapag meron kang lemon water, tapos pag ininom mo siya, maasim, so maasim pa yan. That's gonna be helpful. Pero hindi mo masasabi that it's already alkaline. So after some time mo siyang gamitin, nawawala yung citric acid, tapos when you taste the water, it becomes bitter na. And ang ginagawa natin is tinatapon na natin yon, where in fact, that's actually the perfect condition of the lemon na gagawin niyang alkaline yung water. Okay? So, ayan. So, there are different ways that we can do to measure the pH. Okay? Usually, I discuss these things kapag nasa lab na. But since we don't have lab sessions in these online classes, I reserve and I pray that you're going to cover this when you go to college. Okay? Madali lang naman yan. Now, let's start our discussion with the biomolecules itself, the structure of the biomolecules. If you have read the materials that I have posted already, So you will know that biomolecules, okay, the analogy that I use is like a chain. Okay, so why? Because this is a polymer, okay, and then one link is actually a monomer. Okay, that is a monomer. And each of the biomolecule has its own monomer. However, there is one group that is a bit more diverse because it has no um, repeating monomer for all its type. Okay, later on you will discuss that. 3 out of 4 classes of biomolecules are classified as polymers. These are long molecules that are made of very similar repeating monomers. So in this one, ano kaya to? Kung makita nyo, merong parang pentagon, may bilog, and then may CG, TC, GC, TA, CG. Ano ba yung mga yan? So these are, okay, these are nucleotides, and nucleotides can be found in nucleic acids. And this one, what are these things? Parang may kakaibang mga, yan, may pa-alien dito, kakaibang structure. That is actually protein. We're going to discuss that. And then lastly, mga carbon rings na to, these are carbohydrates. So where is lipid? Why can't it be considered polymers? Okay? So later I will show you why. Okay, definitely it's a biomolecule, and definitely if we're going to look some of its type, it can be considered a polymer, specifically when we talk about the fatty acid, but not all its types, specifically steroids. Okay? So all of the biomolecules can be broken apart or digested to obtain their building blocks and energy inside them. Okay? Biomolecules can also be built. Okay? So, when we eat something, so yung bawat composition ng kinain natin, nade-degrade natin yon, and then that is the time that we can use it. Okay? This is catabolism. And then when we break something and then we're going to rebuild and we're going to build something into our system, that is now anabolism. Okay, so we have here the monomers, and we have here the H end, and we have here the OH, the hydroxide. So if you are going to remove that, okay, if you're going to combine H and OH, you're going to produce H2O, right? And then, madidikit na silang tatlo. This is called, natanggal yung water, remove water, this is called dehydration. Okay, but if you're going to separate that one monomer from the rest of the polymer and you're going to insert water, you're going to put water, and that is called hydrolysis. Okay, hydrolysis is different from hydration. Okay, when you say it's hydration, you're just going to put water in it, not at the molecular level. For example, I'm going to hydrate myself. I'm going to drink water. But I cannot say that I'm going to hydrolyze myself because I am not a single polymer, okay, that I will break down myself into monomers. Okay? Right away. Let's start with the first type of biomolecule, which is carbohydrate. So let me just share this to you. Look at this. We have 20 ounces of cola here, but look at the amount of sugar. Dami, di ba? Okay, so carbohydrate, of course, popular yan sa sugar. Ina-avoid siya kapag gusto mong mag-diet. Okay, and we can discuss that. So it's an organic compound composed of carbon, hydrogen, and oxygen. And look at this, in a very specific ratio, 1:2:1. However, okay, this ratio cannot be applicable to some polysaccharides already kapag sobra na siyang dumami. Okay, later we will discuss that. Okay, so the function is for main source of energy for all living things, and monosaccharide is the building block of carbohydrates. Okay, now these structures are the monomers of carbohydrates. Okay, so there are 3 main types of the monomers. We have the glucose, the fructose, and the galactose. Okay? So, for glucose, yung nakikita nyo ditong may, yan, naka-highlight. We have the C na naka-double bond sa O. So, yan. That carbonyl group, that's called the carbonyl group, nagbabago-bago yan. Okay? So, kapag nasa terminal siya, it's called glucose. Pero kapag nandito siya sa medyo gitna, okay, that's fructose. And iba rin yung sa galactose. Okay? And this is linear form of glucose. But then, when you really study about biomolecules and biochemistry, you would know that this is a nonpolar compound. Okay? If this is nonpolar, and then if you introduce it to water, syempre, magiging hydrophobic siya. Ayaw niya ng water. So, anong gagawin ng linear? So, para mas maging stable yung molecule na yan, magbibilog siya. It will form this ring. So, this is a ring form of glucose. Okay? So, kaya, in the next slides, makikita nyo that glucose can be represented into linear form or carbon ring. Now, let's discuss this type. So, we have a monosaccharide. If the carbohydrate is just composed of one ring, it is a disaccharide kapag dalawang ring na siya. And then, as you can see, marami na dito, sunod-sunod na siya, and that's a polysaccharide. Okay? Now, these are disaccharides, simply because, as you can see, there are two carbon rings. Okay? And the combination or certain combinations of the monosaccharides, iba yung tawag dun sa disaccharide na yun. For example, glucose plus fructose equals sucrose. Galactose plus glucose is lactose. And glucose plus glucose equals maltose. Now, there might be some confusion. So, yeah, this is monosaccharide, this is disaccharide. Pero ano ang oligosaccharide? So, oligosaccharide, these are chain containing 3 to 10 units. However, not all references will agree with you that it's 3 to 10 units. Some of the references will even consider that disaccharide is a oligosaccharide. Okay? Because oligo means few, and if you're going to be very specific with it, ang ibig sabihin talaga ng oligo is when you try to identify the weight of that molecule or the mass of the molecule, tapos konti siya, okay, that can be considered oligosaccharide. Pero kapag dumami na siya at it can be hundreds or thousands of these carbon rings or these monomers, you can consider that as polysaccharide na. Okay? Speaking of polysaccharide, our first example is starch. Starch is produced by plants during photosynthesis and are the primary sources of energy for most organisms. Okay? And is this equation familiar to you? This is the equation for photosynthesis. So this is, anong tawag nila dito? Sabi nila, it's the sugar, C6H12O6. Anong ratio? 1:2:1. Carbohydrate. Okay? Now, starch definitely is, when we speak of starch, there are two terms that you might encounter. So, along the way, and that is amylose and amylopectin. So, ano bang difference ng amylose at amylopectin? Simple lang. Pag sinabing amylose, it's like a single file of monosaccharides, magkakadikit lang sila. However, if they become branched already, yan, makikita natin yan sa glycogen later. So, amylopectin na yung tawag sa kanya. Now, cellulose is very much different from starch. Okay? Cellulose is actually the cell wall of the plant cell, or any cell that has a cell wall, not necessarily plant lang. And if you're going to look at this compared to starch, kita nyo na mas condensed siya kasi this is for structural integrity of the cell. Okay, kaya cellulose talaga is matibay. Now, Kung titingnan niyo yung label ng mga food products that you're going to buy, may nakalagay doon na fiber. Yung fiber na yon, that is actually the cellulose. Okay? Cellulose is not, well, for us humans, hindi natin siya kayang i-digest because we lack a certain enzyme called cellulase. Okay? So later on, mas maiintindihan natin that when we speak of enzyme, sila yung may mga tunog na ase. Okay? Cellulase, okay, amylase. Anong dinadigest ng amylase? Amylose. Okay? So, later on. Now, another example of carbohydrate na polysaccharide is glycogen. So, we can find this naman sa liver natin. For animals, we store our carbohydrate first in our liver. And then, kapag sobrang dumami nito, this then will be processed. Ayan. The body has a mechanism to compress further. Okay? And i-compress na yan further into lipids, into fats. Okay. So another example of a polysaccharide for carbohydrate is chitin. Okay, chitin, very unique to this, it has nitrogen atom, and you can find it in the exoskeleton of insects and the cell wall of fungi. Okay, so as you can see, this is the plasma membrane. We'll discuss this in a while. And then that layer is actually chitin. It provides more structural support for fungi. Okay, for mushrooms. Okay. To summarize, carbohydrates composition 1:2:1 ng carbon, hydrogen, and oxygen, except for the majority of the polysaccharides. The main function is energy utilization. Monomer, monosaccharides, links to monomers is the glycosidic bond. That is the bond between two monomers. Most common monosaccharides, these three. Most common disaccharides, we have the sucrose, lactose, and maltose. And then the most common polysaccharides are starch, glycogen, cellulose, and chitin. Okay? Now, we are going to discuss lipid. Okay? So, I've mentioned kanina that lipid has no repeating monomer for all its type because definitely it has several types or several subgroups under it. We have fats and oils, we have phospholipids, and we have steroids. Okay? So, this time, we're going to have a clear distinction na hindi na natin pwedeng pagpalit-palitin pa tong mga terms na to. Ano ba ang lipid? Ano ba ang fats? Ano ba ang oil? So, well, not all lipids are fats and all fats are lipids. Okay? So, not oils are fats and not all lipids are oils. Okay? So, dapat maintindihan natin yun. Now, let's first discuss ano ba ang fat and ano ba ang oil. So, before that, let us analyze first what this molecule is. This molecule, okay, lipids are made of glycerol molecule attached to 3 fatty acids. Okay, so organic compounds made up of CHO again, like the carbohydrate, but this time in no fixed ratio. So the building block of fats and oil, okay, but not for all types of lipid, is fatty acid. So we have here the glycerol molecule. Anong unique sa glycerol molecule? It has 3 carbon atom here. And then, itong 3 carbon atom na yan, so dyan siya na ma-attach yung 1 fatty acid, another fatty acid, and another fatty acid. So it has 3 fatty acids here. And then, this one is glycerol. So, how do you call the bond between the glycerol and the fatty acid? It's called the ester bond. Okay? So, ang tawag ngayon dito is triglyceride, or according to some reference, other references, it's triacyl glyceride. Now, kung makita nyo kanina, may 3 fatty acid na nakadikit sa glycerol. Now, we can consider kung ang triglyceride na yun is fat ba or oil, depende sa naka-attach na fatty acid. Okay? Kung yung fatty acid na nakadikit is majority saturated, we can call it fat. Okay? And then kapag unsaturated naman siya, we can call it oil if the majority of the fatty acids. Ngayon, ano bang difference ng saturated and unsaturated? It's very clear and hindi nyo siya mapapagpalit sa memory nyo easily. Why? Pag saturated yung fatty acid, look at the carbon and hydrogen bonding. Lahat single lang, di ba? Tapos, siksik. That's why it's called saturated. Samantalang kapag unsaturated siya, there is space here. Kulang siya ng hydrogen. Okay? So, ngayon, tapos makita nyo may double bond siya dito. This actually is called kink. Okay? Yeah. So, this now is unsaturated fatty acid. Now, why is this solid at room temperature? Because it's structurally sound. Compact siya. Samantalang ito, may space siya for movement. So, pwede siyang mag-wiggle-wiggle dyan. So, kaya siya may ability to flow. Okay? So, that's oil. Tandaan na, I will repeat. If the triglycerol has more saturated fatty acids, so the tendency is magiging fat siya. And kapag naman majority is unsaturated, oil siya. Okay? And most of the saturated fatty acids or most of the fats, okay, nanggaling yan sa animals, and most of the oil nanggaling naman yan sa plants. Okay? Now, maybe this is the good opportunity na to answer the question, ano ba ang characteristic ng good or high quality butter at ng high quality margarine? No, kapag butter, as you can see, it's tastier. The fact that it's tastier, it says something na nanggaling siya sa animals because it has a lot. It has more cholesterol. Okay, cholesterol makes the food tastier. But at the same time, you must know that a high quality butter, when you put it at room temperature, dapat it will stay solid. Kasi it says something na mas marami siyang saturated fatty acid. Samantala, ang margarine, a high quality one, when you put it at room temperature, dapat actually, mabilis siyang matunaw. Okay? Pero anong ginagawa ng industry? Kita nyo tong space na to? Okay? We put hydrogen there para hindi siya mag-wiggle-wiggle, para hindi siya mag-flow. Kaya siya tinatawag na hydrogenated fat. Okay? So, hydrogenated siya because hindi naman talaga siya fat talaga in the very first place. It is an oil. And we make that happen, okay? We process that, so synthetic na siya, and we call it trans fat. Okay? So, later on, when we go to second semester, Gen Bio 2, makikita natin na hindi healthy ang trans fat because that can lead to further problems, atherosclerosis. Okay? So, ang ginagawa dito ng industry is they put more hydrogen or they hydrogenate the margarine para mas madali mo siyang i-package. Okay? Now, another example of lipid is phospholipid. Okay? So, saan mo ba makikita ang phospholipid? You can find it sa membranes. Okay, like for example, cell membrane, and we're going to discuss it sa next week when we discuss cellular structures. Na majority of the membrane, not actually majority, but you can say that in animal cell, all of the membranes are composed of of phospholipid. Why is it phospholipid? Anong pinagkaiba niya sa fats and oil? Well, parang similar lang din. Okay, so we have the glycerol here, and we have one fatty acid here and another fatty acid here, but may nadagdag sa kanya. Ano yung nadagdag? It's a phosphate group. Okay, ano ba ang phosphate group? Of course, we have the phosphorus there and we have the oxygen na naka-attach sa kanya. Okay? So, kaya siya tinawag na phospholipid. Okay? Now, there are different ways na pwede mo siyang ipakita. So, we have here, okay, so we have the glycerol, you have the phosphate, and you have the addition of choline. The choline makes the bonding of phosphate and glycerol more stable. It says something about the polarity of the molecule. And then we have the fatty acid here. Okay, or this cute thing here. So we have the head and we have the tail. Now, if we're going to ask, bakit naka-bend ito? So that bend is actually the kink, and that is the unsaturated fatty acid. And if you're going to combine those cute things there, so you will now have a phospholipid, how many layers? 2 bilayer. So this is now the phospholipid bilayer. Now, this is another example of lipid. We have steroids. So ito na yung sinasabi ko sa inyo kanina, na ang lipid, hindi siya laging ang monomer ay fatty acid, because as you can see, for steroids, ilang squares yan, ilang carbon rings yan. So 1, 2, 3, 4, and then 1, 2, 3, 4. So unique yan sa steroids. Cortisol, ayan, ayan, testosterone, estradiol, progesterone. Okay? And you can see that it can be represented into something like this as well. Okay? And then when you go to advanced topics of biomolecules, you will encounter the carotenoids, and you will be able to identify the relationship between carotenoids and the steroids. And ano ba yung implications niya sa pagbabago-bago ng mga colors? Yan. Like for example, yan. Yung colors na autumn leaves. Okay? If you are very interested in anong relationship ng carotenoids at anong relationship ng lipids sa pagbabago-bago ng kulay, well, I leave that to you na lang. Okay? But if you didn't find it anywhere else, you can ask me. To summarize, we have the types of lipids, we have the fats, oil, phospholipids, steroids, and the connection between steroids and carotenoids. So the main function, energy utilization pa rin. Okay, hormone regulation, protection. So monomer, we have some references consider it fatty acids, but then again, this is not uniform for all types of lipids. Okay, links the glycerol to the fatty acid, we call it ester bond. And examples of fatty acids are saturated, and then the unsaturated, we have the oils. Examples of phospholipids, we have the phospholipid bilayer and then the cell membrane. Some common steroids, we have the testosterone, cholesterol, and then vitamin D. Now, I just want to somehow emphasize here the energy utilization. Kung mapapansin nyo, yung sa carbohydrates kanina, energy utilization, that is actually correct. Pero, ang fat kasi, mas compressed yung carbon and yung yung carbon and hydrogen niya mas compressed, and therefore mas efficient siya when it comes to stacking and when it comes to containing chemical energy. Okay? Now, why is that so? Because you will learn later on, specifically when we discuss ATP, that kapag na-release yung isang bond between the two phosphate, there is a release of energy. Parang ganun din sa molecule. Since ang ganda ng pagkaka-compact ng fatty acid, ng carbon and hydrogen, compact siya, mas efficient siya when it comes to storing energy. And because of that, dahil compact nga siya, mas mahirap din siyang i-digest. Okay? Kaya kung nagbe-burn ka ng fat, di ba, mas mahirap siyang mas mahirap siyang i-lose. Okay? Now, let us discuss another group of biomolecules. We have protein. Okay, so proteins are made of amino acids. Okay, proteins are also named as polypeptides. So, from that word pa lang makikita natin na polypeptide. So, that just means it's a polymer, okay? And ano yung umuulit-ulit? Peptides. So, you can say that amino acid, okay, is also termed as peptide. Okay, so yan, proteins are also known as polypeptides. Proteins are the most diverse when it comes to function because pag nagkapalit lang ng position yung dalawang peptides or dalawang amino acid, pwede nang magbago yung function ng polymer, ng polypeptide. Okay? And Anong tawag? And anong tawag dun sa bond that connects the two peptides? Peptide bond. Okay? So kung ang carbohydrate is glycosidic bond, ang lipid is ester bond, ang protein naman is peptide bond. So madali lang tandaan. So what's the composition of an amino acid? So kung makikita nyo sa diagram na to, this amino acid is composed of these groups. So first, we have the amino group, ammonia, and ammonium. Does it sound familiar? So ang composition ng ng ammonia is NH3, ang ammonium is NH4. So kung makita mo dito, NH amino group. So ayan. Then we have here the carboxyl group. Pag carboxyl group, COOH. Okay, and then we have the central carbon atom, and then we have the side chain. Okay, so the identity of the amino acid is dependent on the side chain. And we have 20 naturally existing amino acid, and that just means we also have 20 types of side chain. Okay, from this diagram, we have glycine, alanine, valine, proline, okay, and others. So we have here the COOH and then the NH3, the carbon atom. Pero kung napapansin nyo, saan lang sila nagkakaroon ng pagkakaiba-iba? Dito. Okay, so these are the R groups. Okay. Now, let us analyze this polypeptide here. So some of you may say, ano to? Pero parang ang gulo. The question is, ilang polypeptide or ilang amino acid ba yung makikita nyo dito? Okay, sige nga, hulaan nyo muna. Okay, so actually we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and 7. Paano ko nasabi yun na merong 7? Okay, as you can see here, we have NH. Siyempre, naputol lang yung isang H dito. This is the central carbon atom and this is the side chain. See, ano nga yung sinabi ko kanina? Yung isang carboxyl group, we have the COOH, diba? So, we have the COOH. Okay? NH, ito yung sa another amino acid na ulit siya, NH. Pero ang tanong, nasaan yung isang H? At nasaan yung OH? Ala, bumalik ulit tayo dito sa dehydration. So, kanina sinabi ko, ang carboxyl group is COOH. So, ang meron lang dito is the CO. Nasaan yung OH? Natanggal. Nasaan naman yung H ng NH dito? Diba dapat NH na dalawa? So, nagsama yung H at saka yung OH, it forms water. So, therefore, that process is called dehydration. So, if we're going to count it, we have 7 amino acids. And these are all the peptide bonds. Okay? These are the different types of amino acid and a different way of representing them as well. When it comes to structure of proteins, we have the primary, secondary, tertiary, and quaternary. Of course, hindi siya quaternary ha, it's quaternary. So, to make it simple to everyone else, when we say it's primary, it's basically like one amino acid connected to another and another and another. Kung makita nyo, linear lang siya. Okay? But then, pag secondary na siya, it can be alpha helix or beta sheet, parang you know the nova, parang ganun, parang yero, parang roof, parang bubong. Okay? And then we have the tertiary, and then we have the quaternary. So what's the catch here? Pag primary, of course, that's the foundation of all of the more complex proteins. Okay? Pero kapag kumulot na siya, okay, mas nagiging complex na yung function niya. And then pag nag-further convolution, nagkumulot pa siya lalo, and then mas nag-i-increase yung complexity ng function niya. And then kapag nagsama-sama na yung pag nagsama-sama na yung tertiary, they form the quaternary. Ito na yung mas complex yung function ng proteins. Okay? So basically, what's most important for you to remember kapag structure ng proteins is, kapag mas kumulot siya, kumulot, mas nag-i-increase yung function ng proteins. Okay? So where can you find the proteins? Like for example, this is the phospholipid bilayer. Okay, naalala pa yan? So we have now here the embedded proteins. So of course, so these are proteins, medyo kakaiba na, malaking molecule na siya, and therefore it may allow the passage of some polar compounds already. Because if you again remember the CH, okay, yung mga carbon-hydrogen chains, okay, so they are non-polar, so mahirap makapasok dito yung mga polar compounds. But because of the proteins that are embedded in it, napafacilitate na yan. So later on, pag-aaralan pa natin kung ano ba ang channel at ano ang carrier and what's the difference between them. Okay? And then we have here some enzymes. Okay? So ano bang purpose ng enzyme? Okay? But before we go there, so let's answer this first. What makes your steak red? Okay? So some of you might say na it's hemoglobin. It's the one that is found in the blood. That's what the blood makes red. However, the steak, okay, itself is pinkish in color. The muscle itself, and it's not hemoglobin anymore. It's actually myoglobin. Okay? Now, when we talk about enzymes, hindi dyan mawawala yung konsepto ng lock and key mechanism. This is the enzyme, and whatever product na pinaprocess niya, that's the substrate. There is a one-to-one correspondence between substrate and enzyme. That means a certain enzyme can only process certain substrate. Okay? So ano bang ginagawa ng enzyme na to? So this substrate, magkadikit siya, but after some time, maghihiwalay na siya. So these are now the products of it. What's the good example for this? We have the catalase. Ano bang ginagawa ng catalase? So this one is the catalase. The catalase is the enzyme. Okay? And then, ang ginagawa niya is, ang substrate is the hydrogen peroxide. We have the H2O2. Okay? So, kapag pumasok na yung H2O2 sa active site ng catalase, the H2O2, naghihiwalay siya ngayon, it becomes water and oxygen. Okay? To summarize, the composition of the monomer of the amino acid is we have the amino group, the hydroxyl group, the R group, and of course the central carbon atom. The main function, it's most diverse when it comes to function because kakaiba nga, kapag nagpalit lang yung the positions ng dalawang amino acid, pwede nang mabago yung function ng protein. And when we go to genetics, mas ma-appreciate nyo ang proteins. Okay? Monomer, we have amino acid. Links the monomers, we have the peptide bonds. The number of side chains, we have the 20 R groups. Therefore, we also have 20 unique amino acids. The types is based on the structure. And then some quaternary proteins, we have the hemoglobin and the myoglobin. Okay, now let's discuss the last but definitely not the least group of biomolecules. We have the nucleic acid. Okay, kung sa protein, the monomer is amino acid. Sa nucleic acid, the monomer is nucleotides. Okay, so the nucleotide, like the amino acid, meron din siyang subparts. Okay, first is the phosphate group, the pentose sugar. So why do you call this pentose sugar? Because it has 5 carbon atoms. We have 1, 2, 3, 4, and then 5. Okay? Now, the last one is the nitrogenous bases. The nitrogenous base, siya yung nag-identify kung ano yung identity ng nucleotide. Okay, kung kanina sa proteins, amino acid, it is the R chain, okay, or the side chain, siya yung nag-identify ng identity nung amino acid. This time, it's the nitrogenous base. Okay, and there are two types of nitrogenous bases. We have the adenine, we have the purines and the pyrimidines. What are purines? Kung mapapansin nyo, 1, 2, 1, 2. Ang pyrimidine, 1, 1, 1. So, ano kaya ang importance niyan? So, para hindi nyo mapagpalit itong mga to, isipin nyo na lang to. Purine, konti yung spelling. So, ano yung nag-compensate sa kanya? Ang nag-compensate is yung number of carbon rings. That's how I remember it. Now, this one naman, kapag pyrimidine, mahaba spelling, so it has to balance. So, isa lang yung carbon ring niya. Okay. Para hindi nyo pa rin talaga ito makalimutan, remember the word purga. Pur, purine, and then ga, Ga, purga. So, the rest, pyrimidine na siya. Okay, that's how I remember it. Okay, so we have this. Now, the nucleic acid, like for example, this is DNA. So I want you all to focus in this diagram because this is very important. Once you understood this very well, you can say that proud ka na naintindihan mong nucleic acid. Okay? So we have here the phosphate group, we have the pentose sugar, and then we have the thymine as the nitrogenous base. So if I'm going to ask you, how many nucleotides can you see in this diagram? So we have 1, 2, 3, and then 4. Okay? Now, what are these arrows signify? So ito papunta dito, ito papunta doon. What does that mean? Kasi kung makikita nyo, look at this oxygen from the top of the pentose sugar. And then look at the oxygen, hindi siya same ng orientation. Right? It's because ang DNA, as you maybe know already, it's composed of 2 strands, okay, and they're complementary, and kailangan, pag nagdikit silang dalawa, magka-complement ito. Magka-complement ang thymine at ang adenine, ang guanine at saka ang cytosine. Now, bakit very specific yung pairing ng thymine at adenine at ng guanine at cytosine? Well, first and foremost, because of its chemical structure. Okay? So, kailangan tama yung combination na po-form dito. These are hydrogen bonds. Okay? So, and if you're going to count the number of rings, 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3. It's always like that. Purine pairs with pyrimidine. Okay? Anong importance nun? Imagine, if it's a ladder, tapos biglang may lumiit na part, and tapos titwist mo pa, di ba, the DNA is double helix. So, kapag may part na doon na maliit, so the tendency is the structural integrity of the DNA, madali siyang masira. Okay? Now, another thing, ang phosphate at saka itong pentose sugar, it's always there. Kaya siya tinatawag na phosphate sugar backbone. Okay? So, the bond between the phosphate, okay, and the sugar is called phosphodiester bond. So, ano yung mga significant bonds present here? We have the hydrogen bond and then we have the phosphodiester bond. Ano nga ulit ang phosphodiester bond? It's the bond between phosphate and the pentose sugar. Now, what does the 5' stand? What does this stand for? Okay, this represents the number of carbon atom. Now, anong ibig niyong sabihin? Remember this, ha? So, the carbon that is attached to the closest to the nitrogenous base, that's carbon number 1. In biochem, kapag nakakita kayo ng molecule tapos may corner, that means that it has a carbon in it. Okay? So, we have carbon number 1, carbon number 2, carbon number 3, carbon number 4, but that is not carbon number 5, because that's oxygen. Carbon number 5 is actually in here. That's why it's 5', kasi ito yung pinaka-exposed na carbon dito. That's why it's 5'. And then, when you look at this strand, okay, we have 1, 2, 3, so that's the 3, and this is ito yung pinakababang carbon. That's why it's called 3'. Okay, ito naman, paano to bibilangin? So, we have the nitrogenous base here, and then we have the 1 here. So, we have 1, 2, 3, that's the 3'. And then, for this one, we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. That's the 5'. Okay? So, naka-anti-parallel yung DNA. As I've mentioned, we have here the sugar phosphate backbone, and then yung gitna is the nitrogenous bases. It's like the code. At kailangan maging matibay talaga yung sugar phosphate backbone because the code, okay, yung pinaka-ingat-ingatang code genes ay nandun sa loob. Okay? When it comes to structure, so we have the minor groove and we have the major groove. And do not just believe kung pag nakita kayo ng image sa internet na parang mukhang DNA, it's actually DNA already. It's not. The rotation of the DNA follows the right-hand rule. Oh wow, di ba? Kung sa physics may right-hand rule, sa bio meron din. So, the DNA must be ganito yung ikot niya. Okay? It follows the right hand. So, pag ganun, hindi na yung tama. It's always like that. Okay? It's always like this. Now, the distance between the two nucleotides kapag nasa gitna is 3.3 angstrom. Angstrom is 10 to the negative 10 meter. Well, kapag malayo na siya, it's 3.4 angstrom. So, bakit mas malaki yung outward kaysa sa gitna? Para meron siyang ability to form a helix. Kasi kung uniform yung distance nito throughout, so makikita mo na pag umikot yan, pwedeng mabali. Okay? So, and gusto kong tandaan nyo that one, okay, so yung tamang pag-ikot niya, okay, yung pag-ikot, 360, okay, kailan mo masasabi na nakakomplete na siya ng 360 kapag nakakompleto na siya ng 10 to 11 base pairs. Okay, of course, the DNA kasi has the ability to compress further at sometimes naging loose siya. Kaya 10 to 11 base pairs minsan. Okay? When we talk about base pairs, ang ibig sabihin nun is one nucleotide from another strand and another nucleotide from another strand, they complement each other. Okay? Now, as you can see here, so we have the 5' here, and then iikot lang sila. And then this, okay, this is the DNA, iikot, kukulot ng kukulot, and then it now forms the chromosome, and then the chromosome now can be found in the nucleus. Okay? So, another example of nucleic acid is the famous ATP. Okay? Why? Because we have the phosphate group, we have the pentose sugar, and then we have the nitrogenous group, nitrogenous base, and we have here the phosphate group. Adenosine triphosphate kasi nga tatlo yung phosphate group niya. So, does this mean that the nitrogenous base can change? Okay, like for example, itong adenine na to, pwede ba itong maging G? Yeah, definitely. It can be guanosine triphosphate, thymosin triphosphate, and cytosine triphosphate. Okay? So, that is the nucleic acid. If you're going to look at it, sobrang amazing niya. All the details, all the measurements, sobrang precise dapat yon para maging sobrang tibay niya. The fact na umiikot siya, okay, pinoprotektahan niya yung nasa gitna. Yung pairing ng nucleotide, ng nitrogenous bases. Okay? And remember, the DNA that we have right now, hindi lang yan kahapon. So these are the molecules and they are products of millions of years of evolution. Well, if we're going to believe in the theory of evolution. Okay? Because, yeah, definitely, not all scientists are clinging on to the concept of evolution. That might surprise you. Okay, to summarize the nucleic acid, we have a phosphate group, pentose, nitrogenous base, main function, heredity, protein synthesis, energy, the monomer is for nucleotide, links phosphate to pentose, links two DNA molecules, hydrogen bond, types of nitrogenous base, we have the purine, you have the AG, purga, pyrimidine, CTU, and then types of pentose in nucleotide, we have deoxyribose, DNA, and ribose, RNA. Anong difference ng dalawang to? Deoxy, natanggalan ng isang oxygen for the DNA, kaya siya DNA. Okay? So ribose has one more oxygen. So what is the application of learning biomolecules? If you're going to look at the label, check the label, of course, we have the calories here. Okay. By the way, 1 gram of carbohydrate is 4 calories, while for lipid, 1 gram is actually 9 calories. Kung makikita nyo, mas malaki talaga. Okay? When we talk about calories, okay, kapag capital yung C niya, it's kilocalorie. Pero pag small c, it's calorie. Okay? So, total fat. Meron na kayo na idea dito. Saturated fat, meaning galing siya sa animals. Trans fat. Okay? Kung makita nyo, wala daw. So, wala silang hydrogenation process na ginawa. Okay. Cholesterol, it's actually under fat if you're going to imagine, right? It's going to be under lipid. Sodium, why sodium here? Dapat nandito siya sa minerals. Well, they try to know the context of the consumers. The consumers want to know the amount of sodium in the product because definitely the amount of sodium, lalo na kapag may hypertension ka, dapat nagbibigay ka na ng extra vigilant ka na dun sa amount ng sodium intake mo. Then we have total carbohydrate, the dietary fiber, this is cellulose, sugars, yun yung mga starch na yan. Okay, mga starch, mga disaccharide, ayan. For proteins, we have 9 grams. Vitamin A, okay, this is fat-soluble vitamin, calcium is mineral, vitamin D is a lipid because it's a cholesterol. Okay, no. It's an example of steroid. Okay, vitamin C, okay, which is water soluble. Okay, and then we have iron. Okay, so now we can say something na ganito pala basahin ang nutrition facts. Okay. To end, I encourage you to always check the label of the items that you're going to buy, especially kapag food items yan. Of course, we value our health, okay? And of course, whatever learning that you got from this video, sana tandaan nyo siya because we're going to use these as the foundation of our next topic, which is cellular structure. So, see you sa next chapter natin. And I hope this video or this message finds you well. Thank you.